Hello everyone, our group from VIT Chennai going to present on hierarchical clustering. Hierarchical clustering. In this we're going to study what is hierarchical clustering, cluster dissimilarity, hierarchical clustering working and output, data request, data, types, agglomerative, divisive, linkage criteria and measure distance. What is hierarchical clustering? Hierarchical clustering is a method of cluster analysis seeks to build a hierarchical clusters, also known as hierarchical clustering analysis. We can understand it by taking an example of files and folders in hard disk are organized in a hierarchical clustering. Hierarchical clustering is a predetermined order from top to bottom. On this basis, it falls into two types, agglomerative and divisive. Now we jump to cluster dissimilarity. Cluster dissimilarity in order to decide which cluster should be combined or where a cluster should be split. A measure of dissimilarity between sets of observation is required. In most methods of hierarchical clustering, this is achieved by an appropriate metric, a measure of distance between pairs of observations, and a linkage criteria which specify the dissimilarity of sets or as a function of pairwise distances of observations in the sets. It can be divided. It can be attained by metric or linkage criteria. Software used are Orange, Octave, R, CWise, SciPy. Commercial implementations are MATLAB, Mathematica, NCSS, etc. And daily uses in like marketing help marketers discover direct group in the customers basis and then use this knowledge to develop targeted marketing strategies. Land use identifications of area or similar land used in a earth observation database. Insurance identifying groups of motor insurance policies and holders with a high average insurance claim cost. City planning identifying groups of houses according to other house type, value and geographical locations. Earthquake earthquake studies observe earthquake epicenters should be clustered along continent faults.
So now we understood what is hierarchical clustering. It is just an algorithm that groups similar objects into clusters. Now, the working I will explain of hierarchical clustering using suitable pictures. In this, the working is that the similar group of objects, when they combine, they form a taxonomical relationship. In this taxonomical relationship, they form a strong relationship and a cluster. In this cluster, what happens? The similar kind of objects in this picture, we can see in the first box there are two blue colored dots. These are actually belong to a same clan. Belonging to the same clan, they first join and they form a little bit of big cluster. Now this cluster in the third picture finds some relationship with the third small cluster and it attracts the small cluster. As we see in the fourth diagram, the blue dots on the left side of the box go and combine with the cluster which is bigger to their size, and like this it continues till the last, and in the last final box we see there is only one big cluster. What happens in this? Basically, on merging the clusters, the relationship becomes stronger. Greater the cluster size, better is the relationship. Better is the relationship, they have a strong taxonomical bonding. Now what is taxonomical bonding? I will explain. Taxonomical bonding is a tree call diagram in which all the clusters of similar shape and size show their similar kind of properties. So this is the way clusters work.
I'm going to tell you about data request. Data can be provided in two forms. Either raw data can be provided or distance matrix can be provided. Raw data can be converted into distance matrix. Different applications uses different steps to convert raw data for generating distance matrix. Raw data provided to a software can automatically be converted into distance matrix. By this, we can understand that softwares can accept both either raw data or distance matrix, which will be the finalized processed raw data. Here is some example I am going to tell you how raw data can be converted into distance matrix. The right tabular named raw data gives six position named A to F. The main requirement for the software is distance between all the objects. By using the basic mathematical formula, we can find all the distance and can be arranged in a tabular which you can see named distance metric on your left side. So by this, we can conclude that raw data provided to a software can automatically be converted into distance metrics without human interference.
Agglomerate clustering. So agglomerate hierarchical clustering is a bottom-up clustering method where clusters have subclusters which in turn have subclusters. The classic example of this is species taxonomy. Gene expression data might also exhibit this hierarchical quality. Agglomerate hierarchical clustering starts within every single object in a single cluster. Then, in each successive iteration, it agglomerates the closest pair of clusters by satisfying some similar criteria until all of the data is in a single cluster. So the process involved is we need to assign each object to a separate cluster, and then we have to evaluate all pairwise distances between these clusters. And then we need to construct a distance matrix using the distance values. We have to look for the shortest distance, and we have to remove the pair from the matrix and merge them. And then we have to evaluate all the distances from this new cluster to all other clusters and update the matrix. And we have to repeat this until the distance matrix is reduced to a single element. So the advantages of this clustering method is that it can produce an ordering of these objects which may be informative for data display. Smaller clusters are generated which may be helpful for discovery.
Divisive clustering. This is a top down approach. All observations start in one cluster and splits are performed recursively as one moves down the hierarchy. The basic principle of divisive clustering was published as DINA. The full form of DINA is Divisive Analysis Clustering Algorithm. Initially, all data is in the same cluster, and the largest cluster is split until every object is separate. Because there exist ways of splitting each cluster, heuristics are needed. Dinah chooses the object with the maximum average dissimilarity and then moves all objects to this cluster that are more similar to the.
Now we will discuss on the topic of measure of distance. We have we have many type of formulas for calculating distances. Euclidean distance, squared Euclidean distance, Manhattan distance, maximum distance, and Mahalanobis distance. The most used is Euclidean distance. Now we will see an example. Here we have described many types of data sets in form of alphabets A, B, C, D, E and F. Here now we'll calculate distances of all the data sets from another and describe as a pair. Now if we see the pair with least distance is E and F, so it will make a cluster. Now this cluster will find one more data set which is nearest to it. It is D. So it will join in the D will also join with E and F cluster. Likewise, it will make a whole set of cluster by one joining all the data sets. Now, if we see one more example about an house, if we see an example of flower beds and putting menu to the flower beds. Here in this picture, we have the brown area is menu and all the we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7 flower beds. Now if we see the validity of the information, we'll first see that the manuring of flower beds is most relevant for the flower beds which are in the front because those are mostly visible for the visitors which are coming. So we can manure all the flower beds first and then the back ones. And if we see by distance, we'll calculate the distance of manure to every data set which we have taken as flower beds like this.
Now we have deposit of manure and we have defined every data set with with square areas. Now here we have made distances. Now we this is on our priority that which one we have to select. We can select the nearest one or we can select about our priorities. Like which one will be the best if we do it first and which one we can do it afterwards. Or we can see in which we have to do the least amount of work, which is from the least distance to the increasing one.
Hey guys, this is Vinay Kashyap. I'm here to present you the topic of linkage criteria. After selecting the distance metric, it is necessary to determine from where distance is computed. For example, it can be computed between the two most similar parts of a cluster, the two least similar bits of a cluster, like single linkage and complete linkage, and other some other criterions. Many linkage criterion have been developed in recent times. As with the distance metric, the choice of linkage criteria should be made based on the theoretical considerations from the domain of application. A key theoretical issue is what causes variation. For example, in archaeology, we expect variation to occur through innovation and natural resources. So, working out it with groups or artifacts, a similar way to make sense based on identifying the most similar members of the cluster. Where there are no clear theoretical justifications for choice of linkage criteria, Ward's method is used in this case for sensible default. This method works out which observation to group based on um, reducing the sum or square distances of each observation from the average observations in cluster. This is often appropriate as the concept of distance matches and the standard assumptions on how compute differences between groups in statics is made of. For example, ANOVA and MANOVA. Thank you.